For this next video, I'm going to go over how to move around in Sage Lab Starbase. So this assumes you've already had a fleet and your fleet already has at least fuel in it. Again, there's a couple different ways you can find your fleet again. You can go to your central space station or any space station if that's where your fleet is. You can look at your hangar and you'll see your fleet because it's docked at the space station. Just for kind of differences here, I'm going to actually use this button this time and click on it because it says go to fleet, and basically brings it right back to the thing. So now that we're actually selecting the fleet, we have a couple of different commands down here. We have undock and we have disband. Now we did disband through a different process, but this would have also but this is basically where we want to do movement. So let me just explain what movement is within the Star Atlas Starbase game. So first of all, part of movement is docking or undocking from a space station. So in this case, since we're at or inside the space station, we're docked and we may want to undock it. So let's just go ahead and undock it right now. Okay, now you may notice it slightly says there's a difference here. It says no balance change is found. Please proceed with caution and confirm. So in this case, certain commands within Starbase aren't full commands. Again, these are blockchain things, not part of the game. We want to undock. This is how you undock. So go ahead and click confirm. And again, we'll see the little spinner down here. So it's still processing that transaction and in effect moving it from being in the space station to being undocked right outside of it. We'll also see that we have a status change here to be undocked. And we'll notice here, since we're selecting the fleet, actually I'm going to kind of move the map a little bit further. In fact, I'm going to turn this off, close that, so we kind of have a thing. So just imagine in your mind your fleet, in this case our one ship's just hovering outside the space station. So now we have a new set of commands. We can dock again. We'll save that till after we've moved around. We can warp, we can subwarp, we can mine, which we'll talk about mining later. We could, pretty sure that's scan, but it's not hovering there. And we can self-destruct. I'll talk about that in a bit. So in this case, we want to move our ship. So there are two different move commands. There's warp and there's subwarp. What's the difference? Well, warp is faster, but you can't go as far. And if we actually click on the warp command here, and then click on the space station where our thing is, the interface changes. And so now we have where the cursor is sort of this line. So if I click on that dot, it'll kind of move around. But in this case, our warp can only go into these lightly colored squares. And if you kind of click on one out there, you'll actually see that one, it says out of range. And so we click there. If we go right here, two away, it says insufficient fuel. But if we go one in, we also get insufficient fuel. Why is that? Well, apparently in order to warp with our fleet, we need more fuel than we have within our fleet. So I'm going to go ahead and just cancel warp because that's not usually what happens. But let me just show you subwarp so you can see the different pictures here. I have a feeling this is a refresh issue. So we'll kind of hover over and we'll look at subwarp. We'll click on that. And the interface, we'll click where we want to subwarp, so we'll actually click this one. And we're also seeing insufficient fuel. If we actually zoom out here, we actually can subwarp quite a bit. Oh, sorry, the things here, we'll just cancel warp here. Okay, so here's a typical problem that comes up from time to time. The interface is saying that we have 100% remaining fuel, but the game doesn't think we do. So first of all, there's this little refresh here. So I'm going to click on that. Don't expect it to do anything. And then we'll actually zoom back in so that we're at the MUD Central Space Station. So again, we will click over here so that we have this fleet selected. We'll have our different commands up here and we'll click on warp again. And then we see the areas that we can warp. So I'm going to just click on one dot away. Okay, this time it works. So again, this was a patience thing. So it might be a little hard to read, but it's showing the target destination is 1-39. The fuel cost will be 15. The fleet will have 94% fuel remaining after warping, and the estimated time is 10 seconds. going to go ahead and just cancel that. And so we can see the difference between warping and subwarping. So again, we'll select our fleet. We'll this time hover over and click subwarp, and we'll click the 1 dot over. So interestingly, this one will only cost 4 fuel. You'll still have the 48 or 98% remaining, but it'll take 2 minutes and 23 seconds. So less fuel, slower time. So this is pretty much the main key difference between warping and subwarping. Beyond that, the command is very similar. Just because I'm recording this video and I like to make it go quicker, we're going to go ahead and do a warp. So again, we're looking at warping just 1 square over. So we do warp. And we click on the 1 square over. Again, it says it takes 10 seconds and cost 15. So we'll go ahead and start the warp. And our transaction confirmation comes up. And we'll go ahead and confirm that. Get the little indicator that the transaction and the commands are being processed. We'll also see that our interface has changed here. That says it's en route there, and it'll take 4. Now it's 3, 2, 1 seconds. And we'll see that we've actually stopped there. Now, depending on the ability of the screen, it'll actually refresh, and we'll get a little dot that's actually the square that we're on. We'll also see that this location thing has changed, and now we're at 1 x and y negative 39. Since we're in the middle of, we'll call it empty space, can't really do much here. So if we click on our ship, we'll see that our commands are pretty limited. We can warp, we can subwarp. Again, we'll get into scan in a second, and we could self-destruct, which again, I'll talk about at the end here. So in this case, we just want to go back. So we, in this case, click on our ship, we click on warp. The screen comes up. Now, if you notice down here, it was actually had a timer. So when you do a warp, there is actually a cooldown after that. So you can't just immediately go and click again. So that is another downside of using the warp command, but that's just part of the game. So we're going to click on the space station. And again, 10 seconds, fuel cost 15. We'll go ahead and start warp. Now, to move further with bigger ships, there are longer times and cooldowns that are related to those. So again, that's sort of the just part of the game logic. Okay, so now it says it's en route to the central, the MUD Central Space Station. 2 seconds, 1 second, and 0. And we're back at the thing. So now that we're back there, if we still had enough fuel in our tank, we could make another warp or subwarp. So again, you can kind of string these along if you wanted to. But since we're back actually at the Central Space Station, I want to go ahead and just dock in order to perform one of the future commands. So, and again, you can only dock at a space station. You can't dock out at empty space. Okay, so we'll go ahead and confirm that. And now it shows that we're docked. Could have showed you before, but if we had come to this one, we wouldn't have actually seen our fleet. But since we're docked, we are able to see that. So, and then lastly, I did want to explain the self-destruct and where that comes up real quick. I'm not going to actually demo it because it does have some consequences. But let's say you went too far out into space and you didn't have enough fuel to get back. You're kind of stuck. Well, that's where self-destruct comes in. So you pay a penalty. I believe, an Atlas fee, and your ship basically respawns at the Central Space Station. So you don't lose any of your assets, you lose any of your cargo that you might have had, but it's a way to get back if you misjudge your fuel calculation. So that's where self-destruct comes into play.